Welcome back to another episode of the Samong Yang Outdoors Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Samong, joined here by Nate as always. And this week, instead of being topic specific, we decide to just take a step back and just give you guys some updates as to how our season's been going because we're kind of right in the middle of the heart. I would even say that we're a little bit past the halfway mark on my end of things because we're slightly past the middle of October here, and I only have about another month or so of hunting before it really dwindles out for me. So, as always, before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors, and the first one we want to thank is Vortex Optics. You can shop Vortex Optics in a lot of places, but if you shop at eurooptic.com, you can use code SY10 and you can save some cash on all Vortex Optics products. From rangefinders to binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, you name it, they have it all. And Euro Optic carries essentially all the lineups that Vortex carries and makes.
Secondly, we want to thank Onyx Hunt. This is just an awesome online mapping software. You can use it on your desktop, you can use it on your phone, and it gives you all the good details about where you want to go hunt. Public land boundaries, private land boundaries, timber cuts, burns, GMU information, and the desktop version offers a lot of extra goodies. You get some access to Hunting Fool and a couple other good things, so make sure to check them out.
Lastly, we also want to thank Tacticam and particularly Reveal. These are our trail cams of choice because, one, they are cellular, so you can set up your trail cam in an area where it has service, and you no longer have to go and physically check and disturb that area because now it can just send photos directly to your phone and your desktop, whichever you prefer, and you get pictures and videos right on the spot. One of my favorite things is the solar panel feature. I have some cameras that I've set up way back in June that are still at 100% battery because that solar panel just hasn't let the camera go to the actual batteries in the trail cam itself. So right now I'm getting some whitetail bucks that start to look a little bit more ruddy, which we'll talk about that next week because late season whitetail is something that we will be doing this year. And so, yeah, check them out. If you're looking for trail cams, especially cell cams, Tacticam, the Reveal cell cams, those are our personal favorites, and those are what we recommend. With that said, before we go any further, Trivia Duel.
It's that time.
It's that time. It's my favorite time. Nate, why don't you hit me first?
Okay. We're coming off the end. Like you said, we're a little over halfway, maybe even closer to 3/4 way through a lot of our hunts for the season. So we're coming off a lot of time outdoors. And that kind of got me thinking, I'm a fairly new family man with a 1-year-old daughter. I think probably a lot of our listeners are also young family people and maybe have some little kids. But it got me thinking, spending all this time outdoors, how much time does your average preschool-aged kid, 3 to 5 years old, spend outside in the U.S. every day? Okay, so the question is, what's the average time that a 3 to 5-year-old kid, American kid, spends outside every day? Is it less than 1 hour, less than 2 hours, less than 3 hours, or less than 4 hours?
Is this 2025 kids?
I believe this is 2018 kids.
2018
So,
kids.
Probably less now than 2018, I would guess, but maybe not with COVID. I think COVID probably had a...
Outside?
Yeah.
I'm going to say less than 1 hour.
So you kind of hit the nail on the head. 40%, or just over 40% of preschool-aged children, 3 to 5 years old, spend less than 1 hour outside a day in the U.S. Respectively, the average screen time for that same age category of a U.S. kid every day is about 2.5 hours.
That's not good.
Yeah, it's we've been spending so much time, and it's something, especially this fall, that we've been focusing a lot on as a family, is getting our kiddo outside and spending. There's this cool national initiative called 1,000 hours outside, I think, or something like that. 1,000 hours in a year. Basically, it's this tracker to help kind of motivate families to get their kids outside more. And so 1,000 hours a year is just a little less than 3 hours a day. I think when it gets challenging, especially up here in Northeast Washington, is when the winters come. And it's, 20 degrees outside during the day. And how do you get your kid outside for 3 hours? But it's something that I did growing up with my brother. I mean, we lived outside.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that too. I mean, I feel like I grew up in a good time where technology wasn't consuming our lives, and the only time you really had fun was outside with your actual friends.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, I'm really curious to see how many hours I spent this year just not in the house or not in some type of building, because every year I told you like I would calculate it and then I stop because I'm like, that's just way too much work. Like I'm just out there all the time.
Yeah.
But folks, with that said, you can shut off this podcast and go outside.
Or listen to it outside.
Or listen to it outside. Yeah, that's something that I've been very cognizant of now that I have my two nephews in the house now. They're one of them just started kindergarten back in September. The other one's 3. And we took him out. His name's Eli. He's 3 years old, so he's not in school yet. And we went to deer camp. And this year, my dad and my brother, Chinu, they decided to take that whole week of our Washington general deer season off. And so they went up there, and because they didn't have a babysitter, because my mom also went, they took Eli because nobody was going to watch him. And he actually fared really well. He was actually the one that did not want to come home. And so he lasted out there for like 6 days in like freezing temps and rain and even snow. And he really enjoyed it. But that's just Eli. Eli's just a people person. Mike, on the other hand, he's what we call an iPad kid. He just loves his iPad. It's just crazy to see the difference of kids nowadays with what they're raised on.
For sure.
With that said, my trivia question is a little bit different. And this can be a multiple choice if you want the multiple choice. What is the official animal of Washington State? Would you like a multiple choice, or would you just like to swing?
I knew this. It's the overall animal, or
Uh,
it's not. It's not like a bird. It's not. It's not in a category.
it's the official animal.
Animal.
Would you like a multiple choice?
Yeah, give me some. I have a gut feeling, but give me some multiple choice.
Okay. A, the beaver. B, the Olympic marmot. C, the Bruno hot spring snail. Or D, the American badger.
Oh, I would not have gotten this one. I was gonna say like orca whale or red robin, but okay. So we've got a marmot.
So
We've
got
got
a
a
beaver.
snail, a beaver, and a badger.
Yep.
Man, after hunting season in the high country, it sure feels like the marmot. But I'm gonna go with the beaver.
The beaver.
Yeah.
All right. So the beaver is the official state animal for Wisconsin.
Oh, you had me.
Yeah, I threw you in for a loop there.
Yeah.
Washington's official state animal is the Olympic marmot, which is the only animal native to Washington State, and you can only find it on the Olympic Peninsula.
Really?
Yes. So this Olympic marmot was designated as the official state endemic mammal in only 2009.
Huh.
So some states don't even have an official animal. Some states have an overlapping animal. Like there are multiple states where their state animals of white-tailed deer, for example.
Right.
Washington's the only one, or one of the few, that have a specific animal that's native for the state,
Very interesting.
which is the Olympic marmot.
What was the name of that snail?
So that snail, it's actually pretty interesting too. So it's the Bruno hot springs snail.
The Bruno Hot Springs snail.
And that snail can only be found in Idaho.
Huh.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then the beaver is the official state animal for Oregon. And then Wisconsin's the badger.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Wisconsin's the badger.
Yep, so the beaver is the state animal for Oregon. The badger is the official state animal for Wisconsin. The Bruno hot spring snail is exclusive to Idaho, not the state animal, just exclusive to Idaho. And then the Olympic marmot is the official animal of Washington State.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, decided to make it a little bit more interesting this time, to the best of my ability. Folks, with that said, we have been getting some of your guys' Trivia Duel stuff coming in, and it's been awesome. And we're going to get to it real soon, but if you guys have a Trivia Duel question that you guys think is just really awesome, send it to us at triviaduel@syoutside.com. And the word duel is DUEL, not DUAL. So Trivia Duel with an E at syoutside.com, or just check the link in the description and you can send us an email there.
Well, Smong, we've had a couple hunts under our belt for this year, you could say.
A couple's a little bit undermining.
And we've had pretty much most of the experiences you can have out in the field. I've had a really wide range of hunts, from success to animal spotting numbers to conditions to high country, water, low country, everything.
Yep.
So let's take it all the way back to August 1st.
That's a long time ago, man.
We're talking almost a full 3 months ago now.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's like, usually when it comes to hunting, I have pretty good memory of like what happened.
Yeah.
And now it seems like it's just a blur.
Yeah. So August for us here in Washington is bear.
Yep.
And that's about it. Not even, turkey's not open, fall turkey's not open, grouse isn't open, upland's not open. So, a lot of these other times of the year when, like we were talking about in our late season bear hunting podcast, where you kind of have these extra tags in your pocket where it's a kind of an opportunity hunt, which bear often falls into for Washington as an opportunity hunt. August is the bear month.
That's right.
And this August was one for the books, but in a little bit different way than we expected.
Absolutely. So if you guys tuned into our podcast that we did before the season started, and we just ran through like, this is what we're doing for 2025. Now that we've already done a good half of them, or maybe a little bit more than half of them, in this podcast, we're going to kind of give you guys some tad bits of information of how our season's been going, because there's a lot that's been going on. And so in August, let's just say that our podcast that we did on bear, you can completely ignore that. We have no idea what we were talking about with huckleberries and whatnot, because, to move forward this August, or this year in general, from my personal experience and a lot of people that have just been reaching out to me, we had what I would call a record year for the absolute best berries.
Yeah.
I have never seen in my whole life how, like, the amount of huckleberries, and not just huckleberries.
Everything
was coming in.
Service berries.
Dude,
thimbleberries.
It was so like
blackberries on the west side.
Picture perfect for bear hunting.
Yeah.
And we killed 0 bears in August.
Yeah, in fact, I was out hunting mid-August with a good mutual buddy of ours, Josh Potter. He's he used to be a Washington guy. Now he's a hop-the-border Idaho guy. But he has been hunting bears in Washington since the late 80s, back when you were baiting and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also a pretty avid huckleberry picker with his family. And he started the trip by saying this was top 3 years for berries that he's ever seen in what's that, 35 years, 37 years. And he ended the trip by saying this is the best bear year he's ever seen for August, for bear hunting, which bears used to open September, right? But as far as August goes for berries, this is the best year he'd ever seen. And so that was, at first, we were like, holy cow, like there's berries everywhere. This is awesome. There's just going to be bears everywhere. And then as we worked into season, we got a couple trips under our belt in different climates. We did some timber company land, national forest type hunting down low in cuts, and then worked our way in, the second week of August into high country bear hunting. And there was so many berries everywhere that we kind of started to second guess the idea of berries out in the open concentrates bears into a berry patch when we'd be hiking through thick timber or still hunting timber and finding just loaded bushes of huckleberries down in these creek bottoms in the thickest of timber, right by water and cover and shade.
Yeah, with that said, a lot of our success comes from timber hunting. I mean, not timber hunting, but hunting on timber property. And just a pivot here, if you hunt around the Washington region, or specifically here in the Northeast Washington region, I do want to give you guys a warning that the John Hancock timber property has now been bought out by Manulife Resources or whatever, and they are pretty much now pay to play.
Yep.
You have to lease the property in order for you to access and hunt it. So, in the next few weeks or 2 weeks or so, when our late whitetail season opens, a lot of these over-the-counter hunts happen in units where there's a lot of Hancock property.
Yeah.
I grew up hunting a lot of Hancock property. I mean, Nate's been hunting Hancock for the past several years that he's been around here. A lot of people use Hancock property. Now that it's lease only, it is no longer just open to the public.
Yep.
So I just want to give you guys a fair warning here that you cannot just go to your favorite Hancock property and access it as normal.
Yeah, so a lot of these are posted now with signs at the entrances, but if you guys hunt timber company property, you know that there's 1,000,001 roads for that access from all directions, and so a lot of times they don't hit every single entrance. So you can go on to John Hancock's website and see what properties are leased and what properties are up for lease. But like Simong said, kind of the spoiler is most of those Northeast Washington 100 GMUs, 121, 117, 124, 105, 108, 111.
Yep.
All those ones that are really heavily timber company are also pretty heavily owned by what used to be John Hancock.
Yep.
Onyx is not updated yet. Go Hunt's not updated yet. And then also in addition to that, John Hancock is also an umbrella ownership. And so a lot of these other smaller timber company ones that used to be open for access are also not.
Yeah, so Onyx is, they actually just recently updated it.
Oh, did they?
So if you don't know what this is, if you go on the Onyx Hunt app, and under specifically the Washington State one, there's a feature or a layer that's called possible access. So basically what that means is when you turn that layer on, if there's a piece of property that's not necessarily public land, like say National Forest or BLM, if there's a bunch of green dots in it, that means that it's theoretically open to the public to access, whether it's free or you have to buy a permit of some kind. But generally speaking, you as the public, you can possibly access it. But if you turn that on, if you look at a piece of Hancock, they have now removed all of those green dots, meaning it's just private land now. So that's one feature that you can go on Onyx and you can turn it on yourself, and then you can look, because a lot of the Hancock that I used to hunt, like just like last year, they had all the green dots. This year, it's all gone. So that's one way to do it. And if you want to learn more, we'll leave a link to their website where you can learn about where you can buy the property if you decide to buy the property in the description.
Leasing the property.
Or leasing the property,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
So
they're doing everything on a 1-year lease.
yeah, so I think it's like August 3rd. It goes from August 1st to July 31st.
Yeah.
I basically, as of right now, am just completely avoiding all Hancock property at this point because I don't even know what's going on. They've been, as far as I'm concerned, there's really been no public or formal announcement of, like telling us the rules and whatnot. It's kind of swept under the rug. So
Yeah, this is something that I know this is a sidetrack from our mid-season updates, but this is something that happened for us strictly by word of mouth. And because we live in this area of the state and this is what we do, is hunting and stuff, I think a lot of people kind of feel obligated to tell us updates and stuff. And so we heard about this, I would argue, fairly early compared to most people.
Yep.
And every single person that we talked to subsequently, we were the ones to tell them. They hadn't seen it on a hunting forum. They hadn't seen it on a, some sort of Washington update post, nothing like that.
Yep.
It's all just kind of been word of mouth. And it's like you were saying, and I was saying, it's such a massive part, and it's such a massive pieces of land for this area of the state for hunting. It's a lot of people's where they've hunted for the past 2 to 3 decades.
yeah, so if you just don't know, again, we'll get back on track here. But the reason why I bring it up is because it's very important, and I bring it up because it definitely altered my fall plans.
Mhm.
You know, even before right now, like all throughout September and early October, it significantly shifted my plans of where I was going to end up hunting. So with that said, do your research on it, especially if you're coming out for the late whitetail season. Your spot that you might be eyeing on Onyx may no longer be open to you. So with that said, if you want to pay to play, go ahead. I don't believe in selling out like that. I'm a firm believer in, having as much public access as possible. And so some basically Manulife coming in there and they just want their money, basically selling out. I will not be pitching my money towards them because I don't believe this is the way to go. And it's no longer public land at this point. And not only is it public land, but I just feel like anytime you restrict the general public and you only let a few people hunt it, to me, as somebody who really prides myself in, hunting areas where everybody can hunt like that, it no longer feels the same because it is not the same. It just feels like you're hunting strictly private property because that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my 2 cents on it, and we just bring it up to give you guys a fair warning so that if you guys go out there, like, you don't do something illegal, because at the end of it, ignorance is not an excuse of getting caught or doing something wrong.
We want to give you guys a quick heads up for this because of the date that this podcast is released. You guys can still kind of get ahead of the game. If this is something that you guys want more information about or want us to dive in a little bit deeper to, let us know in the YouTube comments or send us an email, and maybe we'll see if we can get somebody from the company at least on the podcast or talk to somebody and get some more information for you guys. And maybe not just with Hancock, but with some of these other timber companies that allow public hunting or that used to allow public hunting, to kind of give you guys a little bit more scope of how that works in this area of the state, because companies like that hold so much real estate.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
With that said, back to fall bear. Opening day this year, I'll just dive in. Opening day, I hopped over to the west side to hunt with my buddy Austin Harris, or our buddy Austin Harris, and this was weird because by August 1st, I mean, our region here was already popping with berries, and I was kind of like, man, I'm leaving at that time prime huckleberries to go and potentially hunt someplace where the berries might not even have been in, because where Austin was going to take me, it was about 6,000 feet. And all the berries around 3,000, 4,000 feet here were already in. And so we were a little bit nervous that, we were going to go in there and the berries were still going to be green and the bears weren't going to be completely in there. So I drove all the way over and we hiked in 6 miles, and right off the bat, spotted like 3 bears just off in this hillside. And I'm like, oh, maybe the berries are in. And unfortunately for us, that hunt, bears were just moving. They weren't sitting like a normal fall bear. They were just, spend like 30 seconds in that bush, move up, 30 seconds in that bush, and the next thing you know, in 20 minutes, they had completely gone over to another face. And when they're doing that, especially when you're hunting that type of country where you can't just walk to them and you have to do these really extended looping routes just to get from saddle to the other saddle above where the bears are, it takes a lot of time to make a stalk, and that's way too much time to let the bears move. Mm-hmm. So by the time we had gotten over there, like the bears, like we never even saw the bears again.
Yeah.
And that was the opener hunt for me. And yeah, that was pretty much my opener hunt. It wasn't super productive. And then after that, I came back to the east side here and I hunted and in a little spot, and I couldn't get to where I wanted to go because at that point, Hancock had, I learned that Hancock had closed essentially. Mm-hmm. And so changed up a lot of my plans of where I was going to go. So I ended up just going to this random spot, just super deep in there. Never saw a bear, just saw some white-tailed deer, and elderberries were in, huckleberries were in. And again, just all the berries you could ask for were in. Just didn't see a bear, didn't see bear sign. And at that point, that was when I was like, all right, something's just a little bit off here.
Yeah.
Did you go out at all?
Yeah, I did. I went out for the first 4 or 5 days of the season. The first 3 of them or 4 of them were solo, and then the 5th day, I went out with our buddy Josh that I was talking about. And I went to some new spots at the beginning and was seeing bears everywhere, but just hadn't seen any bear sign. And so then on the second half of that trip, I went back to what I would kind of call our last resort places, our tried and true gems that even if you're not going to shoot a bear, you will see a bear. Places that in the past, prior to this year, neither of us had ever been and not seen a bear.
Yeah.
And so I went and spent 3 days there, spent 2 of them with our buddy Josh, or one of them with our buddy Josh, who also has hunted this area since the 90s, actually, knows it like the back of his hand, and same experience for him, kind of some of these last resort.
Yeah,
just
your honey hole.
Your honey hole, yeah. And not only did we not see bears, but we saw no bear sign, and just pretty void.
Yeah.
And so that was that was really shocking. Every time this part of the year comes with hunting season, it always seems like, man, it's hot, and man, it's dry, and man, it's a little smoky. But the reality is that's how most of our early Augusts are here in Northeast Washington. This August was no exception. It was, high 90s to low 100s during those daytimes, and it only got down to the low 70s, maybe the high 60s at night. And so in your head that, the bears are probably going to prefer somewhere cool and damp and dark. But in the past years, we've still seen them out in the berries, middle of the day, peak heat.
And the biggest thing that I can attest to that is because, again, the berries were so good this year, and I think we would say that it was a little too good, where even in the dark timber, the berries were in. So, like, the bears really had no reason to show themselves in the open. I mean, if you can eat all day in the shade, why would you go out and get baked in 90 degrees, So even my trail cams that I had set up in the dark timber, like, I was getting pretty good bear activity throughout August, and I'd hunt around the area in the open clear cuts, and I never even saw a bear, like glassing from first light to last light. Never saw a bear. So after my second trip, I decided it was time to go to Alaska. So I completely left the bear woods, went to Alaska for like 10 days, the middle of August 10th through the 20th, and just went up there to fish. And those videos aren't up yet because I'm trying to run through hunting season first. I'll upload those later when hunting season's over. But we had a pretty good time up in Alaska just with my buddies from Montana. And then it was during this time when I was in Alaska that were you hunting? You were hunting. This was your solo trip.
Yeah, this is my solo trip.
And I was gone the whole time, and same story on your end, it seemed like.
Yep, just a lot of berries, no bears. Up to this point, and up to our point where we went out on the 24th. Yep. We left for our high country bear trip on the 24th. It was the 24th through the 29th of August. I had yet to see a bear for the year.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a bear with Austin, but for me personally, I haven't even glassed up a bear.
Yeah. So we left for our High Cascades bear trip, and this was the 24th of August, and we went back to a place that recently has kind of been a honey hole. This is where I shot my bear last year. Last year we saw upwards of half a dozen bears in this basin, and this is a basin where you have to, well, you don't have to, but it is advantageous to you to either pick to go up and look down into the basin to see if there's activity in there before you commit to hiking up the bottom of the basin because it's pretty treacherous. So we did that. Samong and I split up that night to cover more country because we had been...
we were desperate.
We wanted to see as much country as we possibly could. And long story short, on that trip, I saw a bear that first night in that basin, so we spent the rest of that trip committed to that basin pretty much until the very end, at least. So the first 2/3 of that trip, we hiked in there, saw nothing, hiked out of there, and made our way doing some different strategies, some predator calling, some still hunting, some of that on the last third of the trip, and finally, on the last morning of the trip, back up here in Northeast Washington, Samong spotted a sow and 2 cubs.
Yeah, in my tried and true spot. And it wasn't even first thing off the bat. We sat there for like 2 hours before we even saw those bears come out. And so August was just a grind this year, and I know we weren't the only one because the amount of messages I got from people all over the state,
Yeah.
they were just like, "Man, same story over here, man. Just can't find these bears. There's berries everywhere. Just don't know how to figure these bears out." So, yeah, it was just a year that originally I thought it was going to be just a year where we were just going to pound them,
Yeah.
and then we got humbled,
Yeah.
and no bears in August. So it's funny because, I mean, I'm preluding here, but August we were saying in those podcasts that like this is when we see the most amount of bears.
Yeah.
And this August was like compared to like October. I saw way more bears later in this year than I did in August.
And just anecdotally of people we know, more bears have been harvested.
And
in
we'll get to
October.
that.
Yeah.
So today's October 22nd. So if you're listening to this episode on the day of release, we're recording this the week prior. So we're going to run through everything up to what we've done so far right now. But all of my August hunts are live on the Samong Outdoors YouTube channel. There's 2 episodes. There's episode 1 and 2. And that basically covers our August fall season. And then, yeah, that was August. We roll into September. I spent the first week of September at squirrel camp. And those videos are up on the Samong Outdoors YouTube channel as well. Just had a good time catching up with family, just squirrel hunting. And, you know, there was an okay number of squirrels this year. I mean, we had fun, saw squirrels every day. But mainly, like, again, that squirrel hunt, it's more of just spending time with the family more than actually killing something. So we didn't see any bears this year, I believe, and just shot some squirrels. I don't know. Did you do something?
No, my September was pretty empty as far as hunting goes. Spent some time with the family. Spent some time over on the west side with my buddy Tanner doing some salmon fishing, or our buddy Tanner. But yeah, kind of just focused on family this September. I have a multi-season deer tag for Washington, and so that was somewhat unexpected. And again, with the Hancock closing, that took away. Through podcast episodes and through priors of hunting, you guys have heard us talk about the deer Octo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, spoiler, he was a Hancock deer.
Yep.
And so those 4 years of chasing him are done with, and I kind of had to change directions. So I got access actually on a little piece of private close to home, somewhere I could do some morning and evening sits with the bow, and I did find myself on September 7th at full draw on the biggest buck of my life at about 8 yards. But he had stepped behind a tree. This is tree stand archery hunting. He stepped behind a tree. This was 40 minutes into my first sit of the year. I heard a bunch of crashing behind me, and I was kind of sitting on the edge of bedding to feeding, and hadn't seen any deer yet, nothing. I'd gotten this one big buck on my game cam, and heard some crashing behind me, kind of peek over my shoulder, and this big buck comes crashing down the hill right under my tree stand, stops behind a tree. I draw back, and then he never saw me or winded me, but his buddies were out in the field feeding, and once he stepped out from behind that tree, he just was on a trot straight away from me. I could have stopped him at a hard quartering away at about 34 yards, and I opted not to because in my mind I was like, man, this is 40 minutes into the first sit of the year. Like, this is going to be great. And that was it for him for the year. I had about a half a dozen more sits there. I ended up taking a shot on a little kind of basket rack 4x4 on my last day of hunting. And it was a first light. He came through. I shot, and again, being really new to tree stand hunting and the adrenaline rushing and all that, I just wasn't thinking about the angle change with being up in a tree stand versus being on the ground. And so I ended up shooting him through just the very back of his shoulder, through like the muscle flesh,
Mm-hmm.
and gave it 2 hours, and I went and tracked him. I found my arrow. My arrow is completely clean, and I have white fletching on my arrow, so it's usually pretty obvious when there's blood on it. And I found some speckled blood for about 200 yards. I tracked it and kind of talked to some of our buddies, showed them, on a diagram of deer where I hit him, and showed him some pictures and stuff. And the general consensus was that it was most likely a non-lethal hit, which is just the worst feeling in the world to know that you wounded an animal, and if you can't track him and find him. And then about a week later, he started showing up on game cam again.
He was completely fine.
He was totally fine, which was really great to see. Just had a little kind of scab on the back of his shoulder, but he was hopping around and jumping around and looked pretty unscathed. So at least that was a little silver lining on that. But that was really my September, just about some archery hunting close to home. It wasn't not really something I'd planned or expected to do. So that was a fun little bonus.
Yeah, while you were sitting in a tree stand, editor Chris and I, we made our trek over from Squirrel Camp all the way to Wyoming. And so we drove through Nevada and Utah and Wyoming to get to our destination. And this is also a hunt, as of right now, that's up on my Samong Outdoors YouTube channel, where I arrowed my biggest mule deer to date. And again, I'm not going to spoil too much because the video is live. You guys can go watch it. And I had 3 days to spend there. Went in there really not expecting to actually fill my tag, being completely new to bow hunting deer in general, let alone spawn stock. But on my first full day there, I actually ended up shooting this buck, and just a picture perfect stock, man. This is a very different hunt than what Nate and I do. Usually, like, we're working really hard, hiking 4 miles to just see a 3-point. And this is on private land, so like it's a little bit different of a vibe and environment. And so because it's private land, you have access to a lot of roads that you normally wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And so the style of hunt was cover as much country as possible. And this is also like eastern Wyoming, so like you're in like the sage and more prairie type country versus like northwest Wyoming where you're in like the high country. And so because it's flat and sage and open, you can basically just drive and glass as far as you can until you find a deer you want to go after. And so, again, this hunt is live, but eventually bumped this big buck out of his bed around 10 o'clock in the morning. And he had hopped over the saddle, and with Chris Ock, who's part of Remy Warren's crew, he was the photographer there, but also the guide, because it was through Chris Ock that we got the privilege to hunt here, because he and his dad have been hunting this for like 40 years, right? So this is just they're really good friends with the family that owns this property, and so we got permission to go and hunt there. And so Chris Ock, spending that much time in one specific area, one specific deer herd, you learn like what those deer like to do. Mm-hmm. And he's like, a lot of times if you spook these deer, all they do is they run up over one, and they go into the next draw, and they bed down again. And so we jumped this buck out from one draw. He went up and over the saddle, crested over to the next one. And then you can't see into the draw, but you can see all the open stuff. And so he's just like, just keep an eye out on the skyline to just make sure that he's not actually going over to one extra draw. Mm-hmm. So we stayed up there for about 30 minutes, never saw the deer come out. And so we're like, okay, we're pretty confident he's tucked in here somewhere. And so basically that country is just like, you have a lot of rolling hills, but once you get to the actual draws, there's like it's like almost like breaks country, where it's not like a flat,
corroded.
Yeah, it's just like
almost.
Just imagine a dry riverbed with like steep embankments on both sides of the draw, and he's just like, this is what these big bucks do. So what they do is you'll see them go up and over into a draw, and on the draw there's both sides. Like there's one side and there's the other side. So what they'll do is they will go up to the other side of the draw, bed down, and they'll turn around and they'll look back where they just had come from to make sure that there's nothing chasing them. Mm. And he was spot on. Chris Ock was like calling out all the shots. And so Chris Ock and I, we had come down the draw, or we were coming down the ridge, and we were like slowly creeping up the draw. And finally Chris is like, dude, he's looking right at us, because we were just in the open. And he's like, back up. Like I know where he's bedded. He's bedded right under this little rock. So backed up, and miraculously for a rookie stalker, there was a middle ridge in between us and the deer that would have put me like sub 30. And so I backed out of view. I went down there. Chris Ox stayed back to just film wide, strapped a GoPro on, went up there, and, long story short, I ranged him 27 yards on the dot when I was still like trying to peek over the mound. And just a rookie move. I should have killed him on this shot, but I go to full draw, and I had to take like 2 steps up to like actually see the deer. And for whatever reason, I thought that by taking those 2 steps up vertically, not even horizontally, was going to cover me 7 yards. It covered me probably 2 horizontal yards. And so I go to full draw. The bug's Betty. He's just like looking up at me. And then finally, like after like 2 seconds or something, the bug gets up from his bed trying to get out of there. I settle my 20-yard pin on him thinking he's 20. I shoot, and immediately I could just tell I hit low. Like not super low, but low enough that I know I didn't hit where I wanted. And that was actually a lethal shot. It wasn't like a super quick heart shot, but the deer would have died with that shot. He would have just took some time to die. But again, in the moment, I'm like, he looks like he's unscathed. So he runs up to my left, and again down there, it's just this crazy tunnel system, and the bug has no way out. He's like looking left and right, and he can't climb out of the thing. So he had to like turn back, run towards me, and then finally he found a way up. And I guessed the yardage on that second shot, 60 yards. He was 53 yards. And so I shot, and that shot, he was basically, imagine him just facing directly away with like a 3% turn to the left. It's not a shot that I would have taken if I knew I didn't hit him. Like, that's not a ethical shot, in my opinion. But considering the fact that I've already drawn blood on the first shot, at that point, everything's fair game. I will do whatever it takes to shoot an animal, even if that means Texas heart shotting him. So I shot, and to my surprise, the arrow actually flew true. It's just that my yardage was off, so I actually hit high. It hit like high shoulder and just blew through his neck. He runs over a little bit, and at this point, he was already starting to tip over, but he wasn't going down. So I ran up there, chased him down, put a third arrow in his heart, and he tipped over dead. And that was my Wyoming deer. And then I spent the next 2 days trying to shoot an antelope with a bow. Did not go well. Like, it's just, dude, it's, okay, I don't know how many of you guys have chased antelope with a bow in open country. It is so hard. It's like the antelope bed in the most open stuff ever, which to you as a hunter, it's like, oh yeah, there's antelope right there. But then when you're trying to stalk it, it's like, that's a double-edged sword, because like, yeah, you can see antelope all day, but it's like, how do you even get close? So I will touch on this one, because I ended up just telling our editor, Chris, to like, just forget about filming, dude. Like, I'm not going to have you follow me when it's already hard enough to just have one guy sneak on with the antelope. So I will touch on this one because I should have killed one. We drove up. There was an antelope. He wasn't a very big buck. He was just a good antelope buck. And he was bedded on this little open flat. And there's just like little 2 feet tall sagebrush, like different sagebrush all around him. And so they drive up, and they drop me off. They're like, put a stalk on this antelope. And they drive off, and they go up high, and then they're like looking from afar, like looking at the antelope, look at me. And so I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I get on my knees, and basically the idea is, what you do is you keep sagebrush between you and the head. That's all you do. Lay low, crawl your way up as close as you can, and just keep that sagebrush in between them. About 45 minutes of me belly crawling and avoiding cactus, because there's cactus everywhere on the ground. And I'm like weaving my way around cactus while trying my best to keep sagebrush between me and the antelope. I get to like 54 yards. And I think he might have caught me moving or something, because, I mean, I have one little 2 feet sagebrush between me and him. He gets up, and he's kind of like just looking, and just doing his thing. That's the thing about antelope too, is like they don't bed for long. They'll bed for like 15 minutes, get up, mill around, and go bed again. And so 54 yards, he gets up. And at this point, here's the other thing. You can get close, but you can't draw your bow at when you're prone. So it's like you have to expose yourself, right? And so finally he gets up, and he starts walking directly away. And I'm like, great, like there goes all my hard work. So I get up off the ground, and I'm like, every time he would move directly away or put his head down, like I would like speed crawl. Like I'm on my knees almost, but like I'm like crawling as fast as I can. And then every time he would stop, he would look, I would just lay low. Eventually, I run out of cover, and the antelope's like gaining ground. He's like 80 yards now, and he looks, and finally he picks me out. Like there's just a blob in the wide open sagebrush, right? And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna sit here. So I have my bow, arrows already knocked, and I'm like putting my rangefinder on top of my cam, and I'm looking at this antelope. And the thing about antelope is they're curious, and so I'm looking at this antelope, and he's looking at me. He's quartering to like 84 yards, and he starts walking towards me, just like casually walking. He would walk like 5 yards, stop, look at me, and I'm like, oh, maybe, I mean, if he comes another 20 yards, I mean, I'm going to send this at 60. And he just keeps coming in. He's just walking, and I'm with my Vortex Razor 4000. You can just hold the range, and it's automatically like giving you updated ranges.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 74, 72, 67, 64, and he's like walking fast towards me, and I'm like, oh, this is about to go down. He gets to 58, and I'm like, oh, dude, if he gets to like 54, like that's perfect. And he just keeps coming in. He gets to 48 yards, 47 yards, and then finally, he turns and he starts like, because he was basically coming in front. Oh, now he's like turning to like kind of skirt me in a way.
Mm-hmm.
My last range was 41 yards, and I'm like, all right. So I'm setting my bow or my rangefinder down, and I'm already exposed. He already knows I'm there. I go to full draw, and he turns to me like coring to me, and he starts walking towards me even more. And then finally he stops, and I go to full draw, and I'm like, dude, he's 38 yards. That's second pin. I bring my bow over, and right as soon as I'm ready to settle on this antelope, my bow lets down, and my arrow just sails right over his back.
Oh.
And he runs like 2 steps, and he turns back, and he looks at me, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So put another arrow in. And at this point, he's just like looking at me, and he starts to like kind of do like the head wobble trot, like walk. Like he'll walk 2 steps, look at me. And so he's like now not broadside, he's like quartering away. Like he's starting to lose. I mean, there's distance gaining between us now. I range him again. He's 44. And I'm like, he's still in yard, like in range. I draw my second shot, and he's walking. So I'm like, I'm going to time this. So I put it right in front of his neck. The moment I go to shoot, he stops. The arrow goes right in front of him, and he takes off like 15 yards, and he looks at me again. And at this point, I was like, see, this is when you know it's not meant to be. You had everything perfect, and everything you do just goes wrong. And so he eventually runs off to the other hill and just looks at me, just kind of almost taunting me in a way. And after that, I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. It's just not meant to be. So that was one of the many stocks I put on antelope, but didn't pan out. But that was Wyoming.
Game rich.
Yeah, game-rich environment. And then Chris and I, our Chris, we drove up to Bozeman. He dropped me off at the airport, and then I met up with Giannis from Meat Eater with our 2 camera guys, and we flew up to Manitoba for a caribou hunt. This video I did film. I filmed like a quote-unquote behind-the-scenes style video because this is going to be a Meat Eater episode. And so I'm not going to release any footage yet until they release their episode. I just feel like that's the right thing to do. And so that film, I'm assuming, is coming out middle 2026 or something like that. And so when they release their full video of it, I will release my behind the scenes of it. Because I think it was a pretty cool thing to do, to be able to like see exactly what goes on behind making those professional films, right? Because you always, as a consumer, all you see is the finished product. But to be able to live every single step behind the scenes, it was pretty cool.
Well, to smush 7 days or 8 days or whatever into a 21-minute film is...
Yeah. And it was fun. And so it's a feature-length film, so it's actually like 45 minutes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's going to be a super long one.
Very cool.
I don't want to spoil too much, but yes, we killed a few caribou. I killed my first caribou and whatnot, but I'm not going to give you guys much more details than that because you guys can just watch the film when it comes out. It was a good time. And then, yeah, while I was doing all of this, I believe you were just working.
Yeah, I had those first days while you were in Oregon Squirrel Camp and then a bit of Wyoming, I was doing my archery sits. And then I was just working and getting photos of just monster mule deer and antelope and caribou from you every couple of days. And
yeah, no, it was a fun one. And then as soon as I got back from Manitoba, editor/camera guy Chris and I, we drove all the way down to California again. And we did a 7-day blacktail hunt early. So this was like last week of September, which is the opener for that specific region in California. And this film is the next one to go live after whenever I get time. But as of right now, recording this podcast, that is the next film to go live. And we spent 7 days. We did not fill a tag, but truth be said, we should have filled both of our tags. We just had a few mishaps. Let's just put it that way. That's just the best way to put it. Got close, saw some bucks, saw some really good. I mean, not really good. Seeing what people are pulling out of the blacktail woods today, I wouldn't call them really good. They're just little
Just
solid
black-tailed
deer.
bucks.
Yeah. So California was fun. It was a hard one, but you learn somewhere. And then we hop into October, and I feel like this is when it really picked up for Nate and I, because we had a pretty slow August, and I would even say September, despite shooting my biggest mule deer in a caribou. And I think you hunted because I had that first week of October off.
Yeah, so I drew a Oregon mule deer tag again this year with my buddy Tanner. We both drew the same tag, and so we were headed back to the same unit that Samong and I went to in 2023, where we saw some just beautiful deer, saw a lot of bucks. I ended up filling a tag on a little forky on the last day 8 or 9 of that hunt. Got pretty close on that 2023 hunt to a big old 170, 180, just beautiful mule deer. So that was kind of the previous experience that we were going into this hunt with. Tanner had never been on this hunt, and so it was all up to me to hype him up about this hunt, how good it was. And we had 8 days, and it was the most challenging 8 days of hunting of my life. There were definitely some pre-existing conditions that made it difficult. It was overall very warm during the day. It was very sunny during the day, and then it was a full moon and clear at night for the first 8 days of the hunt. And so that made it pretty difficult as far as deer movement goes in early October when they're already pretty holed up. And we went 8 days and did not glass a single deer. I did not glass a single deer. Tanner glassed the butt of one deer disappearing into some trees about 2 miles away on day 3. And while we were hiking in between spots on day 4, we bumped a doe. But other than those 2 brief encounters, we did not glass up a single deer in 8 days.
That is brutal.
This was easily the most mentally challenging hunt that I've ever been on. We were lucky to see pretty much every other species of big game on the west, in the west on this trip. Besides deer, we saw some elk, we saw some mountain goats, we saw some bighorn sheep. But it's really an experience we spent 8 days just in some of the most picturesque deer country that you can imagine, and didn't see anything. We did about 40 miles and about 12 to 15,000 feet of elevation gain, hiking all through this unit. So that was about from October 4th to 13th, and then I had just the last couple days of Washington season. That we're filming this on the 22nd, so mule deer closed last night, and so I went to a couple spots here for my last few days and saw some deer. Saw one buck really far away, and we went out just together with Chong last night and saw a bunch of bucks, saw a bunch of deer, but nothing legal. Not exciting as that sounds. I had a blast seeing deer.
It was fun. I mean,
It
we
was
saw
a lot of fun.
I mean, it's not every day where you just see deer like all day long.
Yeah.
Especially when it's bluebird skies and it's a warmer day. Like usually it's like those days you see deer at first light and you see deer at last light.
Yeah.
But no, yesterday it was like I don't think we really went an hour, between not seeing deer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just nothing legal. We saw a lot of forkies. I mean, we had on our way out, Wachong had glassed up this deer silhouetted up against this hill that we actually came down on. And we didn't even identify it. I was like, let's just run as close as we can, get within range, and then we will identify it.
Because, I mean, we were talking like last 3 minutes of shooting light.
Like, basically,
maybe.
The only reason why we saw that deer was because the sun was behind us and it was like glowing on the deer. If you reversed it, there's no way you would have saw that deer, right? And so this deer, the moment we looked up there, Wachong's like, I think he's a buck. And the moment he said buck, I was like, let's run over there. Because this is about, 650 yards.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to run like at least 150 yards, put Nate within 500 yards. And so we get over there. It's like, right on 500 yards about. And I'm like, give me your spotter. We get up there. And I'm like doing my camera, doing GoPro, and getting the spotter on it. And as soon as I get the spotter on it, I look at the deer, and I'm like, dude, he is super tall, man. Like he's big. He's one of the bigger ones we've seen. But because he's like kind of looking at us, like he's kind of frontal, and so I could just tell he's a fork. And I'm like, dude, I hope if he turns, there's just a little fork on the top. And then he eventually turns, and it's just the smoothest forky I have seen.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, look at me again in the sunlight, and I hope he has eye guards. And then he looked at us, and it was just a smooth bore, not even a little bump to give us false hope that it was an inch. It was just a big old forky again. And that was pretty much a wrap for Nate's mule deer season here in Washington. Granted, there's still a few days left of whitetail season, but I don't think Nate has time to get out.
No, I'm headed back to work after almost 3 weeks off.
Yeah, but for me, I was fortunate enough to harvest a deer here in Washington, actually 2 deer. Speaking on yesterday, I actually shot my doe yesterday. But to rewind a little bit on Washington season's opener, 2 Saturdays ago, opening day, it was super rainy, it was super windy that day, and I had decided to, I'm at deer camp, like I'm camped with my family, but because there's so many people at deer camp, I decided to drive out from that particular area and just go day hunt a different area. This is actually a spot where Nate and I have hunted before, not for deer, but we've been around the area for other stuff. And I just told Nate, I was like, I'm just going to go up there and, go and hunt. And if I see a good sign, like I'll send what I find over to Nate so that if he wants to go up there, he can go up there as well. And, man, this was, throughout my whole life, I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I've hunted with Nate. I've done high country hunts. I've done everything. The first time ever in my life, on my way in, my hiking, I cramped. It's never happened to me before. Like this was, I don't know what it was that day, but my pack it felt like a backcountry pack, even though I was day hunting. But before I was about to crest this mountain, I mean, it could have been a myriad of stuff. But
we're talking about a mountain too. I mean, just to give a little perspective, this spot you start off with 2,500 feet of gain in just over a mile.
It was not.
It's pretty gnarly.
It was not easy, right? And so, I left deer camp at 4:00 in the morning. I guess I slept for 2 hours because I was so stoked I couldn't sleep. Went over there, took my time to get up there, and didn't see. Or as soon as I got up to the top, there's this little flat, this little bowl, and it's actually where Nate and I have seen elk in before. And I spotted 6 does. And when I got there, the wind was in my face. It was raining. And within like 5 seconds, like my glasses were all watered up. My camera lens was all watered up. And I'm like, I can't hunt in this wind. So I eventually skirted that, went to the timber, and I kind of just still hunted my way along the timber. Eventually got into some deer, nothing legal. And then by 11 o'clock that morning, I was soaked to the bone, like just drenched. I mean, I had my rain jacket on, but when you're doing that type of hiking, like you're sweating like crazy because rain gear just doesn't breathe. I don't care what you have. You're either getting wet from the rain or you're getting wet from sweat. So by 11 o'clock, one of my knees was actually, my left knee was actually starting to hurt. And so I was like, I need to, give my left knee a rest here. So I found this little rock and I went and sat there and I was so tired because it's like, I just did like 2,700 vertical feet and I was running on 2 hours of sleep. So I went on this rock and I just kind of passed out. I woke up like an hour, 30 minutes later, and I'm just shivering because I have just at that point, I had in my base layer and just my little grid fleece on. And I was just like leaning up against my pack. Like I haven't even done anything, just literally sat down on the pack and I fell asleep. And I woke up and I was shivering because I was cold and wind was starting to pick up. And it was about 1 o'clock when I woke up and I was like, there's a little hillside over here that I want to go sit in glass for the evening. But I didn't want to sit there when I was wet and cold, so I decided to start a fire to dry up so that when I glassed the evening, I was warm. I gathered some wood and started a little fire. And about 10 minutes into my fire, I hear like just some loud crashing, maybe like 100 yards right below me in the timber. And I'm like, oh, there's a deer right here. He probably spooked because I was messing around with the fire. And so I run over to the rock and I'm like looking down at the edge and I don't see anything. And I'm like, whatever. So I come back to my fire. And about 5 minutes later, I'm like just, warming up and I'm like kind of just scanning and I look to my bottom left and I see a white dot like 150 yards away. And I'm like, I don't think that was there. So I throw the binos up and I'm looking at the rear of an elk. And I'm like, oh, there's an elk right here. So I throw the binos down, grab the camera, and sure enough, it's so thick. It's just like you have a lot of pixie stick trees. And so like you really just see glimpses of these elk as they're coming through. And sure enough, there's a lane. I have my camera set up on them, and you just see one elk filter after the other. It's just like cow, a cow, a cow, another cow, and then the last one pops out, and I just see rack. And I'm like, oh, dude, if this was rifle season, this is the easiest chip shot of my life. 150 yards away, I'm sitting next to my fire, and he just steps out. He's just like a little 5-point, nothing big, but like anybody would be happy with him. And they're just kind of chilling 150 yards away, and just like I'm next to my fire on top of this rock, just looking at this elk. And that bull was actually like chasing his cows around. I think they were still rutting. And yeah, just had a pretty cool encounter with them. And then they eventually just meandered off into the woods, never saw them again. And then I eventually dried up. And at this point, I was already like 6 miles in. And I'm like, well, if you're already 6 miles in, what's another 2 miles? And so I pack up and I start making my way even deeper. And it's about 3 o'clock. And I remember I looked back at the mountain that I had peaked. And I'm like, if I was to go back from where I'm standing right now to the mountain, and I get to the top of that mountain, to backtrack what I did, that's about 15% of the way back. And so I'm like, well, if I shoot a deer in here, it's probably going to really suck. 5 minutes later, I crest that ridge. In a little draw, I bump a group of deer. And in it is this little dinky 3-point. And he's about 30 yards away, but I can't see. So like the moment I crest over, it's funny because I wasn't even trying to look into that draw. What I was trying to do was I was actually trying to just find a spot to glass the other open hillside. But there were so many trees, you didn't really have a good vantage. And while I was moving around, I jumped this group of deer below me, like 30 yards below me, out of their beds. I mean, they were bedded in the nastiest stuff ever. I mean, when they were getting out, they were having to hop over logs that had fallen down. And so as soon as I crested over, I saw the little white rump of a fawn jump out, and I'm like, oh, there's a deer. And the second one followed, and immediately I could see antlers. I knew he wasn't big. And then he goes out, and again, I'm messing with my camera, and he stops, and he's looking directly up at me, and this is like 40 yards. And I can't identify because when he's looking directly at you, all you see is just 2 points. So I'm looking through the binos, and finally the big doe is like hopping towards him and finally pushes him out. And as soon as he turned, quartering away, I saw his left side had 3. And at deer camp, like I'm usually not very picky because it's just like you just shoot deer to, make sure the family can celebrate it. And they start hopping away, and it's so thick. I'm not thinking I'm going to have a shot. And there's this one little lane 85 yards away, and I can see like the bodies of them flashing. And I'm just like, well, I'm just going to yell. So I did a sheep bleat. I was like, bah. And to a miracle, like the one deer that stopped in that lane was the buck. And I'm like, all right, just got to make sure there's no other deer. And sure enough, he was the only deer there. So 85 yards. I mean, I'm shooting my new 280 Acme at that point. I just settled my crosshairs right behind the shoulder to the best of my abilities, and I just shot, and immediately he just took off. And I'm like, I have no idea if I hit him or if I hit a twig. And then they all just took off, and I can't really see through the trees. You just kind of see deer running all over at that point. And about like 10 seconds later, I just hear loud like rock sliding, and then I just see a bunch of deer take off up the mountain. And I'm like, that's either the deer that I shot rolling off a cliff, or that's just the deer running, and they were just like kicking a bunch of rocks down. So I run over there, and I immediately get to where I shot the deer where he was standing, and I see blood. And I'm like, that's a hit. And so I track him for a little bit, and there was not good blood. Like I was losing blood. I was really having to find, and almost at some point I was on my knees just to find blood. It didn't help because everything was wet too. So like the blood just didn't stick as well as, dry leaves. And basically, eventually, I went over, and he did tumble off a little cliff into like some thick stuff. And I'm like, well, I got my work cut out for me. I'm like 7.5 miles in at this point, all alone. Nobody knows where I am. And so, yeah, he's just a little dinky 3-point, and got him up. Basically, by the time I got my pack loaded, it was like 5:30 in the afternoon. And I was like, I got a long way out of here. So eventually made my way out, 3.5 hours of a pack out down some serious elevation. And my route that I came in was like 7.5 miles, but when you have a whole deer in your pack, I was doing everything in my ability to cut that route short. And so even if it meant that I was going to have to gain some elevation to cut over a saddle or something, I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having to hike out 7.5 miles, I was actually able to cut my pack out trip distance-wise by 3 miles. So my total distance on my pack out was like 4.71 miles according to Onyx. And that was just me willing to gain some elevation to just cut over a saddle rather than loop around the mountain and whatnot. So 3.5 hours of packing out in the dark, and it was so sketchy on some parts because this was super steep, and I don't know how many of you can relate, but when it's steep and dark and you're traversing through country you've never hunted before or you're not super familiar with, you don't know what the safe route is. And there were so many times where like I would have my headlamp on and I would look 20 yards in front of me and you would just see abyss. It's just dark abyss. And I'm like, if I go over there and it's a cliff, I'm screwed.
Well, this area is also pretty cliffy. Like
Very.
hiking up, you have to kind of wind around because you get cliffed out on areas that you can't hike out.
And even going up that morning, there was multiple times where I was like rock climbing almost just to get over this rocky face. So it was pretty sketchy. There was multiple times where I couldn't safely like ladder my way down with my feet. So I was literally like sitting on my butt, but when I'm saying sitting, I'm actually just vertical, like standing, but I'm like leaned up against the embankment of the wall and like sliding down.
Yeah.
It was not safe, but I was so desperate just to get back to the truck. I was just willing to do whatever it took. So eventually shot my deer, and then that was that one. And then I came back home, took care of my deer, went back up to deer camp because my dad and my brother stayed up there. My brother Chinu ended up missing a giant 4-point at 50 yards, and he blamed my bipod for, making his gun heavy. And, right before the gun went off, his gun went down and blew up a rock in front of him. The buck just took off. And I'm like, no, that's just you. If you're missing a big buck at 50 yards, like, that's not the bipod. That's you. And so he misses a buck in that spot. And then Wachong and Chris, they carpooled with me. And so Wachong eventually ended up in that same spot. He ends up shooting a really good buck, and he kills that one. And then the next day, Chris's parents came over, or they drove back up to deer camp. And Chris's mom actually shot her first ever deer at deer camp.
What was her first deer?
I don't know if it's the first deer, but first deer at deer camp.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so she and my uncle, which is her husband, they drove up together, but they like kind of split a little bit. Like they're not super far apart, but you can kind of hunt on your own. Yeah, and then she was just working her way over, and she just had 2 bucks running past her. The first one was a 2x2, and then the third one was a 3x3, very similar to the one I killed. And she just shot him on the run and dropped him on the spot. Yeah, she necked him, and then he didn't die like right away. Like she hit it kind of high, but it was enough to put the deer down. And then she shot him again, and she killed a deer, and waited for her husband or my uncle to go over, and yeah, she killed one. And then Thursday, my brother Chinu redeemed himself by shooting a nice little 5-point whitetail buck. And then we all came home Thursday night. And then I went to California for a wedding. And so I spent the second weekend of deer season here in California at a wedding. I basically flew in Friday night, attended the wedding Saturday, and then first thing Sunday I left. I was like, I've got things to kill back at home. And so Sunday, I get back home like Sunday at noon, and then I load up the truck real fast. I pick up Wachong comes over, and we drive out because I have a second deer tag. And the second deer tag, at that point, I only had like 2.5 days to fill.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which here is an antlerless.
It's an antlerless tag, and this is in a unit where it's pretty much like 90%, maybe a little bit more, 95% private. Mm-hmm. And so you really have just these random parcels of public that you kind of have to spot hop. And so Sunday night, we drove out, didn't see a single deer. We came back home, went back Monday morning, and went back to the same spot, saw no deer. And so we just spent Monday just driving to all these different pieces of public, just trying to find deer. And we saw deer. We saw a lot of deer, but most of them, as expected, were on private property. And then Monday night, like 15 minutes before you couldn't see anymore, we were driving to this final piece of public. And all along outside of the public boundary, like we had a bunch of deer, probably like 60 deer, just like coming out to the private property fields to feed. And I was like, man, with how these deer are moving, it seems like they were all bedded in that thick public piece. And then they were just coming out into the open to feed at night.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to drive home that night because I was super tired, sleep deprived. And so we went to the nearest town and we just rented a motel. And it was like, it makes no sense to drive all the way back home, sleep for like 3 hours, and then drive all the way back here in the morning. Like, let's just pay and, sleep. So we spent the night in this little town. And the first thing, we came back to that piece of public where we had seen all those deer funnel out of. And then we literally parked the truck, grabbed our gear. I looked out there where we had seen the deer, and sure enough, these deer are starting to come back and funnel into this piece of public. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad this is working out. And to our luck, the first 2 deer that we saw cross into public were 2 bucks. And I'm like, this does not happen. I'm looking for a doe. So we hike up there into this little ridge, and once you get to this ridge top, you can kind of see the whole piece of public. And the sagebrush here is like really tall, 4 to 6 feet tall. Like if a deer's in there, you are not seeing them. And we had seen those 2 bucks kind of disappear in the sagebrush. We thought they bedded. And then I looked up the draw, saw a lone deer. I was like, it's a lot smaller. It's probably a doe. And so I'm telling Wachong, like, hey, let's just go to that deer. And, as we're working away over there, I look to my left. There's like 10 deer funneling to my left. And immediately I'm like, there's a bunch of does in there. And long story short, I set up on those deer. And one of the does finally cleared. And a 450-yard shot, one and done. She ran 80 yards and tipped over dead. And filled my second deer tag on the final morning. And then I looked at Wachong. I was like, hey, are you sure you saw a legal buck this morning? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm pretty sure. Like, he was way bigger than the one we saw on video. And I'm like, all right. Well, if that's the case, then let me call Nate real quick. So I get on the phone. I call Nate, woke Nate up from home. And I'm like, how bad do you want to shoot a buck? Because I think we have a legal buck over here. And Nate's like, really bad. And so Nate made the drive all the way down there. And then, again, that's what we were doing yesterday. Just spent the rest of the day standing there looking at deer and just couldn't find a buck with the third point on public. We saw one 2x2 with eye guards already, but he just spent his time chasing this doe on the adjacent private property field. And yeah, that was about it. And then that was just yesterday. And then now we're sitting here in the podcast studio giving you guys our mid-season updates. But that's basically it so far. I've filled 4 tags, my second deer tag, my Washington deer, Wyoming deer, and then a Manitoban caribou tag.
So as of right now, for those of you invested in the marathon bet, I'm going to start training.
So on our hike out yesterday, Nate was like, man, I'm going to start training. But I was like, man, I can tell, though. Like, you're in a lot better shape this year. And I was like, I would love to just do a marathon to get myself in hunting shape, too. Because, I mean, when you were doing your Oregon hunt, you were, faring very well.
Yeah, I mean, we had multiple, 4,000-foot days that I did fine.
You just cruised through. Yeah, and so I figured, you know what? I'm not going to... You called it a sympathy marathon. I'm like, no. If I was to do it, even though I won the challenge, it would be a self-betterment marathon. It's just for, me and personal growth. So, I don't know. We might both end up running a marathon at some point. I don't think I'm going to do the same one you did, though. I'd probably start with the easiest marathon I could find, though. I don't think I've ever run more than a mile in my life. And I was only running a mile because I was forced to in elementary school, And so I think it'd be fun. But as of right now, folks, that's where we are. That's our mid-season update. I still got 2 elk tags and 2 more deer tags for myself. That's not including the people that I'm just going to try to help throughout the rest of the season. And so we would love to know how you guys are doing. We've already seen a lot of people find success. In fact, we were actually talking about this yesterday. We were like, man, some people are pulling out slammers, big blacktails, big bears, big mule deer, big elk, you name it. It just seems like 2025 has been a stellar year for a lot of people.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have had to put in extra work this year, pushing it to the 9th inning and then finding success at the end, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. So, folks, that's all we got for you guys so far this week. We will do another recap of the second half, but we can't recap it yet because we don't know what's going to happen. So, with that said, we're going to wrap it up here. But before we go, we're going to do some fast facts.
We're going to do some fast facts.
Let me hear yours.
Okay. All right, so this one is Simong and I after our bear hunt, and maybe this is preluding a little bit, but we've been talking about maybe some future ideas for bear hunts, and those may or may not involve a lever gun. And so that got us talking about, which lever gun would you get? And there's a debate out there about which caliber and which cartridge you get of the 30-30 versus the 45-70. These are two of the most popular lever gun cartridges. So a fast fact about the 45-70 is this is the first metallic rifle cartridge that was widely put into use by the U.S. Army. This happened in the 1870s, and both the cavalry on horses and the infantry carried this rifle. The bullet that was loaded into this cartridge for the 45-70 carried by the cavalry was a 405 grain bullet, and the one carried by the infantry was just over 500 grains.
I'm just trying to figure out what the practicality of a 400 grain bullet is for infantry purposes.
From what I've read, it was close quarters, and obviously a 45 caliber, hard hitting, large diameter bullet. But it just kind of had me chuckling at the fact that, we're shooting 100 there's 143 grain, 6.5 Creedmoor with a suppressor and a good recoil pad. You're at maybe 9 foot-pounds of energy. And, our predecessors were on horseback riding around shooting 405 grain bullets with I think 40 some foot-pounds of energy, recoil and just the manly men.
Yeah, I think even if I do get a lever gun, my first one's got to be a 30-30. Like I'm going to steer away from a 45-70.
Yeah, and actually next week I'll have a trivia duel about the 30-30 versus the 45-70 that I discovered in this rabbit hole, which might help your determination.
Oh, wow, I'm looking forward to that because I could use some persuasion. All right, that's good.
What do you got for me?
My fast fact for you this week is about trees. Did you know that trees do not die of old age the same way animals do? So animals, if they don't get eaten by a predator or killed by a hunter, they eventually succumb to old age. Mm-hmm. Trees do not die by old age. The only way they die is actually because of external factors, meaning pest, disease, or sometimes just starvation, which is when the tree just cannot get enough sunlight or water or nutrients. But to say that a tree in and of itself just dies is not true because they do not die by themselves. It's always an external factor where they cannot get the proper nutrients or something actively kills the tree.
Very interesting.
There you go, folks. That's all we got for you guys this week. It's been a long season. I think this year I've seen more mountains than my bedroom, which I love. I live for that stuff.
That's pretty special.
So this weekend is the opener for rifle elk season here in Washington. By the time this podcast goes live, we're just barely in that season. So, but we don't know what's going on right now, but we will do another catch up at the end of the season. But for now, we want to wish you guys the best of luck in the woods. Be safe. Do not point your gun at other hunters. Use binoculars. But that is to come. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.